Have you ever been so lost in a story that the real world just disappears? Maybe you're deep in a novel, imagining dragons or heroes as if they're standing right in front of you. Or you're playing a video game, living a narrative that feels like your life. Even an ad can hit you hard, making you laugh or cry, only for you to realize that it's just selling a product. These moments pull us into worlds that feel so real, even when we know they're fiction. But what if those worlds are steering us wrong? What if they shape our thoughts in ways we don't even notice? This question obsessed Plato over 2000 years ago in the Republic. Through his character Socrates, he took aim at the poets of his time. Think of them as novelists, filmmakers, or game writers of today. He called their stories dangerous illusions, arguing they trick our minds and store emotions for things that aren't real. In his ideal society, he'd ban poets, fearing their power to mislead. Your favorite book, game, or show? Plato might see it as a trap, like a gateway to the Matrix, where a crafted reality hides the truth. So why was Plato so afraid of stories? What made him think they were dangerous enough to exile poets? In this video, we'll explore why Plato fears poetry's influence, how he sees its potential to shape us, and connect his concerns to debates we face today. By the end, you might start questioning whether your favorite story is guiding you toward truth or leading you into a clever lie. Stories can feel so real that we believe them even when we know they're made up. Think about myths of gods or heroes. These narratives shape how we see the world. Plato was deeply troubled by this power. In Book 2 of the Republic, he accuses poets like Homer and Hesiod of telling lies, especially about the gods, and warns that these falsehoods can have a harmful effect on young minds. He says many of the stories they tell now, however, must be thrown out, those that Homer, Hesiod, and other poets tell us. For surely they composed false stories, told them to people, and are still telling them. Consider Hesiod's theogony. Cronos, fearing his children would overthrow him, swallowed each one at birth. His wife Rhea, desperate to save their son Zeus, tricked Cronos by giving him a stone to swallow instead. Zeus survived and later defeated his father, taking control of the cosmos. Plato himself does not believe in the story, because gods, he says, cannot be cruel and act like that. But even if it were true, it should be passed over in silence, not told to foolish young people. Young minds absorb stories like sponges, Plato argues. If they hear about gods lying or fighting, they might think it's acceptable to behave in the same way. Therefore, he insists that storytellers must be carefully supervised. Only stories that are good and virtuous should be chosen, while those that are harmful or improper should be rejected. He also emphasizes the importance of encouraging caregivers like nurses and mothers to share these carefully selected stories with children, since stories have a far greater impact on shaping a child's character and soul than physical care alone. Imagine Plato today scrolling through streaming platforms or game scripts grumbling, "This show glorifies deceit," or "That ad manipulates emotions to sell junk." Stories like Cronos eating his kids disturb Plato because they show gods as cruel and deceitful, when he believes a god isn't the cause of all things, but only of good ones. Gods are perfect, truthful. Tales like these are lies that twist how kids see right and wrong. It's like fake news or a sleek ad, warping your reality to sell a bad idea. Plato's worry isn't just about accuracy, it's about the effects these stories have on young minds and the society. If children grow up believing deceit and cruelty are acceptable, it could shape their characters in damaging ways. That's why he insists on carefully choosing stories that teach virtue and truth, and why those who care for children should guide what stories are shared. So what kinds of tales are we passing on? Are they shaping us toward wisdom and goodness, or leading us astray? That's Plato's first big concern, but he is not stopping there. In Book 3 he digs deeper, explicitly showing how stories don't just influence what we think, they really shape who we become. When you admire someone, do you ever catch yourself copying their habits? Maybe you've picked up a character's catchphrase from a show or started acting like a fictional hero. Plato saw this as a serious issue. In Book 3 he focuses on imitation, or mimesis, and argues it can shape us in ways we don't control. He points to Homer's Iliad, where the poet describes the priest Chryses begging for his daughter's release. And he begged all the Achaeans, but especially the two sons of Atreus, the commanders of the army. But then Plato notes, after this, however, he speaks as if he were Chryses, and tries as far as possible to make us think that the speaker isn't Homer, but the priest himself, an old man. This is imitation. Homer becomes the character, adopting his voice and style. Contrast this with simple narration, where the poet stays himself. For example, if Homer were to describe Chryses coming to offer a ransom for his daughter, and then continue to speak as Homer rather than speaking as Chryses, this would not be imitation, but straightforward storytelling. Why does this matter? Imitation runs deep. Plato warns. Imitations practiced from youth become part of nature and settle into habits of gesture, voice, and thought. If kids imitate flawed characters, a dishonest priest, a vengeful hero, or a madman, they might become like them. He says they mustn't become accustomed to making themselves like madmen in either word or deed, for though they must know about mad and vicious men and women, they must neither do nor imitate anything they do. He wants to ban imitators of bad characters, allowing only those who mimic good men. But he is not wholly against poetry yet. At this stage he acknowledges its importance, believing that education in music and poetry is crucial, because rhythm and harmony deeply influence the soul, shaping it profoundly and bestowing grace. He just demands stories that inspire virtue, not vice. It's like choosing a game that teaches teamwork over one that glorifies betrayal. Still, there is a catch. Doesn't imitation help us understand others? Could banning it stifle creativity? Or is Plato right that it risks wiring us wrong? Plato is starting to build a case against poetry, but he is still open to its potential if it's tightly controlled. Let's move to Book 10, where he takes his critique to a whole new level, arguing that poetry isn't just misleading, it's dangerously far from truth. A great story can be so powerful that it makes us forget it's not real. Think about watching a movie that moves you to tears. You know the actors are just playing roles, but the emotions feel very real. Plato saw this emotional power as a serious problem. In Book 10 of the Republic, he explains that poetry and art are actually copies of copies, and because of that, they are far removed from the truth. To understand Plato's argument, it helps to think about the difference between something perfect in our mind and the versions of it we actually encounter in the world. He gives a bed as an example. When you think of a bed, you might picture a specific one you have at home, but you also have a general idea of what a bed is, something made for sleeping, with a flat surface, a mattress, or maybe a frame. This general idea isn't just one particular bed. It's the perfect concept of bedness. It includes all the qualities that make any bed a bed. Plato calls this perfect idea the form of a bed. According to him, forms are unchanging perfect templates that exist beyond our physical world. They are not the things that you can touch or see, but they are the real essence of what the things truly are. So the form of a bed is the ideal bed that exists as a kind of blueprint or model for all actual beds. Now the beds we use in real life are attempts to copy or imitate this perfect form. They can never be as perfect as the form itself, because they're physical, subject to wear and imperfections. Finally, a poet or a painter doesn't create a real bed. Instead, they create an image, description, or imitation of a bed. For example, a painting of a bed or a poem describing one is a representation of the carpenter's bed, not the perfect bed, nor even the actual bed itself. So Plato identifies three levels: the perfect, invisible, unchanging form of a bed, the ideal; the physical bed built by a carpenter, a copy of that ideal; and the artistic image or description, a copy of the physical bed. Because poets only imitate the last one, Plato argues their work is twice removed from truth. They're imitating the imitation, and therefore their stories or images are less reliable or truthful. This gap from reality worries Plato because the artist or poet doesn't really understand what they're describing. For example, a poet might write beautifully about a warrior or a cobbler, but they don't actually know how to fight or fix shoes. It's like someone on YouTube confidently giving medical advice without any training. They might sound convincing, but they lack real knowledge. Plato uses this to say that poets are more like storytellers, repeating images without true understanding. But there is an even bigger concern for Plato, the way poetry affects our emotions. He observes that when we listen to a tragedy, say a sad story about a hero suffering, we enjoy the emotions it stirs up. We feel sympathy and get caught up in the hero's pain, praising the poet for moving us so deeply. We cry over these fictional sorrows, even though in real life we might be embarrassed to show such strong emotions openly. Plato warns that feeding our pity and sadness on these stories can make it harder for us to control those feelings when real hardship strikes. Imagine binge-watching a sad TV series that leaves you feeling emotionally fragile afterward. That's the kind of effect he is talking about. To Plato, poetry is like a kind of illusion or distraction that stirs emotions and clouds our ability to think clearly and rationally. But here's a big question: don't those strong emotions also help us develop empathy? Feeling sadness or compassion in response to a story might teach us to care about others and understand their struggles. So while Plato warns us about the dangers of stories that are far removed from truth and can manipulate our feelings, it's worth thinking about whether he can be underestimating the positive role art can play in connecting us to human experience. Have you ever trusted someone's opinion because they sounded convincing, only to realize they didn't know what they were talking about? An influencer preaching about politics or health maybe. Plato faced a similar issue. In Book 10 he challenges the claim that poets are wise. Some said, "Poets know all crafts, all human affairs concerned with virtue and vice, and all about the gods as well." Plato is skeptical. He asks, if Homer had really been able to educate people and make them better, wouldn't he have had many companions and been loved and honored by them? He notes Homer never governed a city like Solon, won a war, or invented anything like Thales of Miletus, who predicted a solar eclipse. Is any war in Homer's time remembered that was won because of his generalship and advice? Are many inventions and useful devices in the crafts or sciences attributed to Homer? The answer is none. Poets, Plato says, are imitators, not experts. This resonates with today's debates about who we trust. We listen to celebrities and influencers because they're charismatic. But are they knowledgeable? Plato would say we often fall for eloquence over wisdom. Is Plato right that stories, poems, games, and movies are dangerous illusions we should control? Or is he missing their value? He leaves the door open, noting that the ban on imitative poetry is not final. He is open for the possibility that someone might be able to construct a defense of poetry that would change his mind. Maybe poetry's power to stir emotions isn't a flaw but a strength, teaching us to feel for others or explore truths that reason can't reach. Think about your favorite story, whether it's a book, game, or a show. Is it helping you grow or holding you back? Does it show something real or is it just making things up? Plato challenges us to ask, are we really seeing the world clearly, or are we trapped in a web of stories? What story would you share to prove that stories can be good for us? Would you say they have the power to inspire and teach, or that they can be misleading? Let me know what you think in the comments. See you in the next videos about philosophy.